Hi, welcome back to Science 1206, the Weather Dynamics Unit. I'm Ms. Ledwell, and in this video, we'll talk about heat transfer. Let's begin. Recall that the particle theory of matter states that all matter is made of tiny particles, atoms, molecules, and ions. The particles are always moving and have energy. Thermal energy is the energy of motion that makes up a substance. Heat is defined as thermal energy that is transferred from one object to another. Heat is transferred from one place to another by three different processes: radiation, conduction, and convection. Recall that solar energy travels from the sun to Earth through radiation. Radiation is a type of thermal energy transfer in which atoms or molecules give off energy in the form of electromagnetic waves. Electromagnetic waves carry the energy from the sun through space and release it when they interact with some form of matter, such as the ground, water, or air. Conduction is the transfer of thermal energy between two substances that are in direct physical contact with one another. When particles on the surface of an object heat up, they vibrate and create kinetic energy. As warmer particles come in contact with cooler particles, they transfer the kinetic energy to the nearby cooler particles. The energy always moves from a substance with a higher temperature to one with a lower temperature. Let's look at a diagram showing conduction. Here we have a warm particle represented by the red color. When a warm particle collides with a cooler particle, here the cooler particle is represented by the color blue, there's a transfer of kinetic energy from the warmer particle to the cooler particle. Let's look at another example of conduction. This is a common one you'll see in your home when you heat up a pot. When a pot is placed on a burner, the particles of the burner are hot and the particles of the pot are cool. The particles of the hot burner collide with the particles of the bottom of the cool pot and transfer kinetic energy to them. We can see in our diagram the bottom of the pot is getting warm, represented by the change in color from blue to red. Then the particles of the bottom collide with the particles of the side and transfer the kinetic energy. You can see over time, due to the collision of particles and the transfer of energy, we're getting a change in color from cool, represented by blue, to warm, represented by red. This process continues until the heat has been conducted throughout the entire object. It's important to note the particles of one object do not leave their original position. They do not transfer to the other. It is only the kinetic energy that is transferred. Now let's look at another example of conduction from land and water to air. After the Earth's land and water absorb energy from the sun, the molecules in these areas start moving around more and collide with the air molecules near the ground more often. These collisions pass the energy from the ground and water to the air through conduction. Because of this, the air right above the land and water begins to warm up, reaching a temperature that's very similar to the temperature of the land and water below. So conduction heats the air right above the ground and the lake through collisions between molecules found in the ground and the water and in the air. Next, let's look at convection. Convection is the transfer of heat in liquids and gases that occurs when particles move in a circulating pathway. It is the process in which a warm liquid or gas moves from one place to another, carrying heat with it. Note that convection does not occur in solids. It occurs in fluids such as liquids and gases. Convection currents are patterns of movement where warmer gas or liquid rises and cooler gas or liquid falls to replace it. Let's look at an example of convection currents in wind. When air is heated by the sun, it expands and becomes lighter, less dense. Remember that less dense fluids, liquids and gases, rise and more dense fluids fall. Therefore, this warm air rises. The surrounding cool air is heavier, more dense, and it falls, replacing the warm air. The cooler air is then warmed by the sun, causing it to rise, and the surrounding cool air to fall. The pattern of movement is called a convection current. Now let's look at an example of convection currents in water. When a burner is used to heat a pan filled with water, the bottom of the pan is heated by conduction, and the water heats up by convection. As the water begins to heat up in the pan, the water expands and rises to the top, while the cooler water moves down. This pattern is repeated until all the water in the pan is heated. This same idea happens on a giant scale in large bodies of water like the ocean. Now it's time to review. Complete the learning activities in Brightspace.